Charlie is an attendee right now because their item's not.
Okay. All right. So, good evening and welcome to the May 18th edition of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Plattsburgh, where we will hear two applications. Appeal number 2239 from Signs Now on behalf of the VA Clinic and SGT International renting signage, 23 St. Charles Street, the former St. Peter School, and of course, Prime. So we'll start with Signs Now. Are they here, Ethan?
Yes, I'm promoting them, the panelists now.
Okay.
Ron, just for the benefit of the record, you should take a roll call and call the meeting to order.
I'm sorry?
You should take a roll call and call the meeting to order.
I don't know why your
I thought I
camera's
called it.
not working.
That's all right, as long as they know I'm there.
I called it to order, I thought. Well, maybe I call the meeting to order if not. Attending Megan,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Ellie,
Here.
Scott,
Here.
Kathleen,
Here.
and I'm here, Ron Nolan. We also have attending our attorney Corey, Shalise from staff, and Joe McMahon and Kyle Berto from the building inspector's office, and Dean, city attorney. Okay. Kevin?
Yes,
Are
sir.
you with Signs Now? Are you Signs Now?
That's me.
What's that? You're
That's
Signs
me.
Now?
Yep.
Yes, okay. And you have an application in front of us at the VA clinic, and was there some confusion about the sign?
Yeah, there was a little bit of confusion about that, but I was originally, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, I was originally
No,
told
it's okay.
that I was allowed 150 square feet, and it was an honest mistake by everybody in the office that I ended up being a little bit bigger, ending up with a little bit bigger than what I'm supposed to have.
Okay. You're allowed 24 square feet. And Joe, now, did you say it's 31, not 36?
Yes, 31.8 square feet, based on the calculation.
Okay. Zoning board, I assume you've read everything. The 4 questions, 5 really are answered with the word no. Does anybody have any questions regarding this signage? I'll open it to the board. No? Okay.
I have a quick question, Ron.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious what the sign says. I don't have anything on my paper that says what the sign actually says. Does it just say VA clinic?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Do they both say VA clinic?
They do.
Is that what it actually says exactly, is VA clinic?
Pardon?
Is that exactly what it says? VA
Yes, they-
clinic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joe, I don't think we have any pictures, right?
That's what I was gonna ask. All I have in my packet is just the black and white of the sign.
Yeah, I've got a darker picture that shows the.
Yeah, the copies didn't come out very well. They do both
No.
say, both signs say.
Oh, they
VA.
do. Yeah, okay. Kyle, do you have something that shows it any better?
He probably doesn't. There's pictures of the building.
I just thought it'd be good if we saw them, you know.
Yeah, I have nothing that shows any sign at all.
Well, on the original application, it does show it a little better, and it's the letters VA and then clinic taking up the whole space.
Okay.
Joe, can you like hold that up to your,
Yeah, just up to the camera.
Yeah, sure. I can barely see it. I'm looking right at it.
No, we have that.
Yeah, but you can see
Oh,
the
yeah,
word.
that says VA.
You can see the letters,
I
right?
see.
Okay, that doesn't come out on mine, but that's okay.
All right, I'm gonna open this to the public for public comment. So Ethan, can you see if anybody has a hand raised for this?
Currently, no one has a hand raised.
I'll give it a moment. Just in case somebody's gonna raise their hand, why don't we leave that open? And Ethan, let us know while we're doing the seeker if somebody raises their hand.
Okay.
Well, let's do the short form seeker. Of course, question number 2, does it require a permit? Says no, it's a yes. And it needs variance from the ZBA and a sign permit from the building inspector's office. Other than that, does anybody have any other questions regarding the seeker? If not, I am looking for a motion regarding the seeker.
I'll make
Okay,
a
I'm looking
motion.
for,
I'll make a motion.
okay,
With regards to appeal number 2239 in regards to the short environmental assessment form, after review of part 1, that the board check in part 2, questions 1 through 11, that no or small impact may occur. And as a consequence of that, the chair may check the box that we have determined that the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impact.
okay, seconded by
I'll second.
Ellie, did you say Ellie? No. Okay, Kathleen? All in favor?
Hold up one second. Hold up one second. Kathleen, what's your address on Court Street?
68.
Kathleen's within 500 feet.
Okay. Oh, actually, by the way, Megan, are you voting on this one because you're not recusing yourself from this?
yep, I'll vote on this one.
Okay. All right. All in favor relative to the seeker, raise their hand and say
Hey.
aye.
Ron, Kathleen
Yes.
can't vote, so she can't second the motion. I'll second the motion.
Okay. Ellie, okay, you second the motion. Okay. All in favor of the motion seconded by Scott, say aye.
Hi.
Aye. Okay, so that is the seeker. Ethan, has anybody raised their hand?
Not yet, Ron.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing for this. We have 62 days to decide.
I'm sorry, do we need a
Anyway.
roll call vote because of the visual meeting?
Always a good
We
idea.
can do it. Okay, I'll do that for the seeker. I'll do that. For the seeker, I voted yes. Megan,
I voted yes.
Kelly,
I voted yes.
Ellie, you were muted. You're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I voted yes.
And Scott,
I vote yes.
okay. Secondly, so I can sign that. Is there any other discussion? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion in regards to Appeal 2239, Class B variance for the location 23 St. Charles Street to allow them to put 2 signs on the building as shown in the plans, totaling 32 square feet max.
I'll second that.
Second, okay. Now for this vote, are we going to Shalice or Joe with the chat?
Go to Shalice.
Okay, so you're gonna go to chat. Oh, you're gonna go to Shalice, chat. And a yes vote is to approve.
Okay, I have all 5 votes.
Okay, do you want to tell us how many there were?
All 5 are yes.
Okay, you can poll the board if you'd like, Shalice.
Megan, you're a yes.
Yes,
Elizabeth, Ellie, you're a yes.
I am.
Ron, you're a yes.
Yes,
Kelly, you're a yes.
Yes, I am.
And Scott, you're a yes. You're muted,
you're
Scott.
muted, Scott.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Kevin, you're all set. Thank you for participating in the project process. Get yourself a permit. You're all set. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay. Well, I don't know. I kind of had it for tonight. I'm a little tired.
Agreed.
Maybe we can talk in a couple months. I gotta go on vacation. Okay, I guess, Ethan, are you bringing in the next round of attendees?
Yes.
Hi, Charlie.
Hello, everyone.
Just waiting to see. Do you know, Charlie, how many people are coming?
So we should have Turner Bradford, Deb Osterhout, Dean DeVito, and Todd Curley. So it's 5 with me. And then the folks from the city.
Okay, and Matt, who's coming besides you? You're muted, Matt. You're muted. There you go.
Yep. From the city, it's myself and Gail.
Okay. I'm just waiting to make sure everybody's. Hi, Deb.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
And then we also have Dan and Emily from Saratoga Associates just signed up.
Right. Okay. I mean, it looks like, do we have everyone now?
I believe so.
Okay. Good evening. Here we are, 2 weeks later. I want to preface this by saying it's been keeping me up late at night. And you too, I bet. But we have gotten, as you know, we closed the public hearing, left the record open, reserved the right to have more public hearing if we felt we needed to information changed. This evening, although the ad, I just wanted to clarify something that we talked about in the pre-meeting. I'm just going to say it again in case people are joining us for the 7 o'clock meeting. The ads and the various legal ads discussed comments, written comments and voicemails being delivered by 3 p.m. last Friday. There was some FOIL, and I was asked what about the things that were received after that, and I said that as far as I was concerned, any public comments up to and through the meeting written like that could be accepted and made part of the record. There's no reason not to. There's no reason to, again, as I said it in 6.3, I'll say it again, we're asking the public and people in general to participate in a process that has been altered by the pandemic and by Pause New York. And I think we can give them some slack too when it comes to if we're going to expect them not to let us be not so rigid, we can be not so rigid with them too. So anyway, I got new information up to and including around 6 o'clock, 5:30 and 6 o'clock today. And we will make sure all of it is part of the official record. That said, though, the ad also talked about the possibility, I just want to be clear about this, of people making public comments during the meeting and so on. That was for, in case somebody wasn't at 6:30, that was for the previous application we just finished, that we allowed public comment. We didn't get any, but that's what that part of the ad was for. It was for that one because that one was ready to have a public hearing. We've closed it here. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm trying to be efficient about this, and we have some questions and some concerns. I do anyway, and I'm not sure about everybody else. I've been writing them down. I got the information with the elevations that I asked for. I found a few things that didn't quite add up right, I believe, and we'll talk about those. And then I think we want to talk conceptually about, after that, at least in my mind, any other issues that we see with the plan and questions we have. We had questions raised by the public and their comments, new questions, new comments, not just I don't like it or I do like it, but it's just because they're saying it's this or that or whatever. New questions, new comments, some of which were recent about engineering and were answered today also. I deal with engineers a lot. Sometimes they don't always agree. It's pretty easy on the size of a joist, but they don't always agree on stormwater management as an example. So I guess Charlie or whoever, I want to talk first about the elevations that were.
Ron,
Hello?
Yeah, for those of you that are on the phone or not on the video, this is Corey Auerbach speaking. Ron, do you want to just go on the record with the members of the ZBA that are going to be participating for purposes of voting on this matter?
Oh, yeah. I apologize. Yes. We have a conflict that is developed with Megan Whedon, who works for Casella Waste Management, or whatever, Waste Management, I guess. And that company, her employer was approached by engineers or Prime or somebody on behalf of, even though the city is the applicant, asking about refuse service and I believe dumpster enclosure design, etc. So although she doesn't feel it would be a conflict with her, she felt that there could be the appearance of a conflict and has recused herself from voting or participating in the Prime application process because it could be inferred that she could in some way profit or gain commission or some other form of gain if the process if the project is passed. And so anyway, she's recused herself. As you know, Ellie has been here this whole time, and one of the reasons has been that we felt that if anybody had a problem, whether they were sick or had some other reason, that we're supposed to have 7 members, we only have 6. That we would have somebody ready and waiting, and Ellie is fully up to speed, right, Ellie? Are you all set?
I'm good to go.
Okay, so there are now, because of the recusal, only 5 board members. You need, that's a full board to vote. We are bound to provide to you, even if it means postponing until we can, 5 votes. Right now you have 5 people voting. So that's not an issue. I suppose something could happen, but I don't see it. So that is the new lineup. Originally, Megan was going to be doing it. We picked back and forth. So, okay, Charlie?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Ron,
Now I'll go to
Ron, can I interrupt
Yes.
for a minute? This is
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
a question procedural wise. Why is the chat on YouTube not available for the audience?
I would like to know that as well.
Do you know why?
I think we talked about early on when we came up with these procedures for this time period we're in, that we disable commentary on YouTube. I think we were concerned that people might get the impression that we were accepting public comment through that vehicle when we're not.
Well, except that it's a way for the audience, so to speak, to chat amongst themselves and discuss. Otherwise, everyone's in a vacuum. We don't necessarily have to read it or follow it or do anything as a result of it, but they should at least have the ability to chat amongst themselves,
Yeah.
much like they would in the audience of a large meeting.
Right. Did we turn that off, Ethan?
Yes, that is turned off. That won't be able to be turned back on during this meeting because of the live stream, to my knowledge.
Say that
Future
again.
meetings will be back. Future meetings, I can turn the chat on for the zoning board meetings if the board wishes.
Yes. Well, you're talking about the YouTube chat, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Do we need to take a vote on this? Does anybody want to just make comments? I mean, to me, it's a relatively informal thing about whether or not they can talk amongst themselves on YouTube. I don't think we have the right, actually, if you want to know the truth, to tell them not to. I agree, Scott. I'm looking for, if somebody wants to vote on it just to say that we approve it, I would take a motion regarding the turning on of the chat feature for the public in YouTube. I don't watch it anyway during the meeting, so.
I make a motion that we enable the chat and comment feature on YouTube for any future meetings. And I suppose this one, if it's possible to do now, I think Ethan said it's not, for public to comment, but that we will not be monitoring it during the meeting.
Okay. Second?
I'll second that motion.
I'm going to do this by a show of hands then. Everybody in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Just before we vote on that, is there a separate, I'm familiar with YouTube, I guess that much, but I know there's comments, but is chat a separate feature? And what are we talking about? Are we talking about both?
Yes, both. It is a separate feature. Chat is like a live stream. It's kind of like a group chat almost, the way it's set up. It's really not terribly different than comments, but I believe at the moment they're both disabled.
And Ethan, are you saying you can't enable chat or comments, or you can one, not the other? What's the situation?
My main concern is going and changing settings and affecting the live stream that we have during the actual meeting right now. I can look into it, and if I can make changes during the meeting, I will. But if not, it'll just have to wait till future meetings.
You're muted, Ken.
Thanks.
So are we not turning on chat, Ethan, or we are?
I can look into it, like I said. So if I have the ability to turn it on without impacting the live stream and impacting this meeting any more than it already has, then I'll turn it on. If not, like I said, we'll just have to wait for future meetings. I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about this? Can we have a motion change to say, turn that on when he is able to, either at this meeting or future meetings?
I think that was the motion.
Okay. All in favor? Raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Roll call. Kathleen?
Aye.
Ron, yes. Ellie?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, so that, Ethan, we'd like that developed as soon as possible. If we can get it done tonight, that would be great. If we can't, for future meetings. I
Understood.
think we're gonna be doing this for a while anyway. Okay. Are we ready now? Okay. All right, I want to talk about the submitted elevations that I requested. And they show up great when I had them emailed to me as a PDF. They don't quite show up as well here, but it's fine. For my purposes, it's fine that, there's a,
Excuse me.
I guess I'm gonna.
Ron, I have the PDF pulled up on my screen. Do you want me to share a screen so everybody can follow along while you're speaking?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman and Matt, do you mind if I just say a few preliminary comments to kind of set the context for the meeting and that way the public knows kind of what was submitted and what we're discussing?
Not at all.
Yeah, although these have been posted on the website, Charlie.
Okay.
Since after you submit them on Monday, but you're free to make a couple of comments. But I'd like to get them up on the screen. This is sort of the meat and bones of this thing.
Sure.
And I'm looking.
So, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, if Charlie wants to make his comments, and then as soon as he's done, I'll screen share the drawings
Okay,
and the
go ahead,
records
sir.
and present it.
Sure. So, while I probably don't need to introduce myself at this point in the proceedings, Charles Gottlieb from Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna here on behalf of Prime Plattsburgh LLC. Here this evening, we have Turner Bradford, our project engineer, Deb Bosterhout from Prime, Dean DeVito from Prime, and also Todd Curley from Prime. To the extent that the board has any management issues or development coordination questions, they're here to help. I'd like to first say that the May 4th meeting that we had prior, I thought we made some great progress there. So I thank the board for that long meeting and your dedication. And I think it was helpful because we narrowed down the issues. And I honestly do believe that is one thing this project and this review process needed, is we keep whittling down the issues until we're ready to maybe get that resolution drafted and take a vote. At that meeting, Gail Henderson King, on behalf of the city, went through the special use permit criteria and how we feel as though the project fits within those criterias. And then there were obviously some remaining questions. Prime, on behalf of their architect, Steve McKenzie, made a submission to try to address those issues. Steve is not with us now. He is at another Zoom planning board meeting, but will be joining us when he is able. However, Ron, I did hear that you were alerted to some height issues. So hopefully we can address those as best as possible.
Yep.
Comes. So we did submit new renderings that show a revisions to the building height, as well as the balcony structure and some of the facade along Bridge Street. We would like to note that Steve had been working on these changes based on the planning board chairman's suggestions. As you alluded to earlier, this is an ongoing process between both boards, and it's just another example of how this project is evolving for the better. And I believe we're actually, the visual impact is much less, and we'll go into that a little later. Ron, as I know you have questions, the building elevations were submitted showing the reasonable 6-foot person. The section views were submitted, as well as a revised site plan showing the expanded width of that sidewalk. We do have additional things we would like to comment on as far as the public comments go and some of our responses. Personally, I would like to respond to a few that were directly targeted towards my integrity. So I would like to get that clarified on the record. But otherwise, we're here to answer questions.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. I'm going to tell you, just if you want to talk about integrity, that I can't get on Facebook without having my integrity questioned about this thing. So everybody's, including the PCC, your, mine, everybody's integrity is under, and I think we're all nice people. How's that? Okay.
Thanks,
but that said, I really want to get to some nitty gritty here. The first one that I'm concerned, when I first saw these, I thought, oh, great. And then I realized one of the things that bothered me to start with before I heard about discrepancy is that some of these buildings, and we'll assume the heights were right for a minute, which some of them are not, are measured to the mezzanine floor, but not the top of the mezzanine, the 186 feet. And frankly, I want to talk about, if you can, I'd like to go to A6.2. The all floors building is about, on this rendering, if we assume for a minute that it's at 119, the same, some of the buildings, the finished floors across the street are lower than the first floor of the prime building. But if it's at 119, and we go to 165, that is a 46-foot difference. And then you're showing about 6 feet from that 165 to the top of the all floors building, which would indicate that the all floors building is 52 feet tall. It's about 37 feet 4 inches tall. That's from, I was alerted to that, frankly, by the owner and others, and I wanted to make sure, so I went down today and I took a picture. I'm not going to post it or anything, but so I could bring it home and really look at it. Again, I left the sanctity of my socially distanced house to do that. So that's that, but it is, I'm not saying that this was done, I'm not attacking anybody's integrity or saying this was done for any devious reason. I'm saying that somewhere it said that these were done with GPS data or with Google Earth data or something. Perhaps that was a problem. But what I can tell you is that the all floors building is 37 feet tall, 37 feet 4, and that would indicate, if it's at the same level as the prime basement floor, that in fact, instead of being 52, if it's 37, that's 15 feet less, and that is still to the mezzanine floor, not the 186, which we see other places throughout the drawings. And I understand that maybe at that very end of the building, of Prime's building, that there may not be a little mezzanine right at the end, at the northeast end of that building, right exactly across from there, but there certainly is fairly close. But anyway, so that's a discrepancy. This is not accusatory. This is so that we can understand what we're really looking at and comment about it, okay? So that was one. Let me just tell you a couple of things, and then I'll turn it over to you. That was one. The other one is that as I look at these, many of them are compared to the top of the fourth level for their difference, and not the mezzanine. Even though the mezzanine roof is at 186, which so you're gaining 11 feet. So that was my first question is, I'm not sure about the heights of the other buildings. They look sort of about right. Although dress code would be about 170. So that's about 40 something feet. And I don't know if it's that tall because it looks to be up the street, slightly taller, if anything, than they're both 3-story buildings. So I just want to be clear about these. I'm not trying to be accusatory in any way. I'm saying that, but I am saying that I think some of the dimensions are wrong, and I think that we need to look at these from the 186. So the building is in 11, as an example, on A6.5, 43 Durkee is not only 11.33 feet down, it's actually 22 feet down from the top of the mezzanine and so on. And that's a concern. But these did, in all fairness, get me to the point where I could understand and make that conclusion, even though it was shown to the mezzanine floor, not the mezzanine top. So
Sure.
there you go.
Okay. So Matt, are you sharing the screen right now?
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the renderings so I can help kind of explain this into context. So if you go back to the original rendering, that was the roof that was proposed. Now, if you kind of quickly go down, you almost see an animation of the change in the building that we were able to conduct based on comments. So I had Dean DeVito explain it to me earlier. It's kind of a pitched roof. It's now going to be a flat roof. And the mezzanine has been pulled back 16 feet now from the edge of the building to completely reduce its visibility. And as you know, for building code purposes, the mezzanine is not a floor. So now if we go and we look to the renderings, if you want to go to A6, A62, I think that's what Ron had suggested first. We utilized, and Steve utilized and the team reviewed that building height to the top floor area, not the mezzanine, because that's what you're going to see from the street. So when you're those 6-foot people on the street, that's what you're going to see. So that's the effect it's going to have on the buildings. Now, that's not to say if someone's driving over in a helicopter, you're going to see that mezzanine level. But the way we've pulled it back and the coloring of it, you're not going to see it from the street. So that was the rationale behind that. Now, that being said, we know that the dimensions of the building are 186 feet. So while there is not a line drawn there from the mezzanine over to, in this instance, the all floors building, you know, the math, you can see the math and you would be able to see the difference. But that was the rationale behind it, Ron. It was that you're not going to see that mezzanine level from the street. And so it was our interpretation that was not what that wouldn't be a real life depiction then. But that notwithstanding, we know the building height of the mezzanine, so you can evaluate that. Certainly we can add the line there, but that's all we would be doing. Now,
and that's what I did.
So just, and I'm pulling up some, so now related to the buildings and the building heights, the sections are based on the Alta survey for topo and building widths, as well as Google area and street views for the relative widths and heights. In talking with Steve McKenzie, the project architect, while this is not precise, they are good indicators of the relationship that you were looking to see. You know, while we understand it sounds like you spoke with the building owners of the related buildings and were informed of the building heights. I'm curious to know if there were surveys or those or some additional information that we might be able to utilize to better refine this. But we use that technology, including the Alta surveys, to provide what we see as this accurate portrayal.
And I think it's showing, if you don't mind me jumping in, the all floors building as somewhere between a 3 and a 4-story building. And I believe it's a 3-story building. So the plate to plate heights may be a little higher, but Steve took these off of, I think there's a note actually on, I had to make sure he put it on the map as to how he met, which is in the bottom left corner of the map. So to give you an idea what we did with the limited amount of time we had to try and pull it together.
I understand. We'll give you all the time you need. How's that? So, what I would say is that, yeah, there was a discrepancy, and I understand it for the all floors building. The other question I would have is perhaps that's true about the mezzanines from the street, but I'm assuming that from the 3rd floor of the buildings, I would be able to see the mezzanine as an example, and it may affect the mezzanine, the 186 at some point is going to affect sun and so on. But what I will tell you, Charlie, is that yes, I was able to take what you gave me and find out this is very helpful. I think there's a couple of discrepancies on building heights. You brought up a survey. I would think that actually, if you'd like, I wouldn't mind if you guys did go and measure the buildings. And then that would help you. I wish I had a survey. I don't. I just had a measurement that I got from a building. And it was actually only one building that I verified. So I went down and looked, and they're all on bridge. I paid more attention to that than Durkee. Durkee's got all kinds of up and down buildings, and you picked some odd ones here and there, and that's okay. But I went and looked, and they're all 3-story buildings. So, they're in the 30-something. I mean, if a story is 10, 12, 11, 13 feet, your stories are 11 feet. Is that accurate, by the way, the 11 feet? Is that what is a traditional prime floor-to-floor dimension? The 11 feet per story.
So typically, we have 9-foot ceilings, floor to paint, and depending on the floor trusses, they very likely are going to be in the 2-foot range. So it's fairly accurate.
Do these buildings have HVAC, air conditioning?
Yeah, mini splits.
Mini splits, okay. And where are they on the outside of the building?
We usually mount them on the rooftops. We'll put some of them, there's a certain amount of run that they're allowed. I think it's 7 feet. So we try to, hide them up on the roof. And sometimes we do end up having to put them on the decks, but we'll set them back on the decks, behind the rails. So yes, they do. The heads obviously go inside, but the condensers are outside.
But there's no reason then, construction-wise in the future, depending on what happens with this, that you would come back and go, oh, we realized that we need 12 feet per floor. Because we can't fit the ductwork in.
We haven't finally designed a structure on this. We don't even know if we're going to get permitted yet. And we've already spent a substantial amount of money on this project. So I'm not going to spend money to design the entire building, not knowing if I can get permits.
Right.
So.
But you're able to, my question is, you're able to build these buildings with 11-foot finished floor to finished floor.
Yes, yeah, 2-foot floor trusses. We, depending on how the structural all works out, not even need that much. So we've done that before, but we have not finally engineered this building yet. So I don't want to.
Yeah, I bet not. That's good. All right. So that was a whole series of my questions. I'd like to see it clarified a little bit more with this same drawings. And I'd like a more accurate, and I don't think it'd take much, frankly. depiction of the buildings, just to make sure the heights are right, because this is one of those critical things, Charlie, that people are talking about, is how tall the building is in relation to everything else downtown. And I think that Prime's ability to answer this, when we talk about compromise, we talk about, did you listen to the pre-meeting? Were you at the pre-meeting, Charlie?
I did, and I heard about that this is a negotiation and a compromise, and I understood that. One of the things, I would like this board to realize is we've done everything that's been asked. This was using the data we had available for building heights. It might help us clarify, how you were alerted to the varying building heights and the conversations you had. So when we go back and clarify it, we can review that data with our data and see best, where the discrepancy is coming from. I understand, while I might not agree, but you're suggesting a negotiation process. And I think one of the very telling things here that was done on this iteration was the pullback of the mezzanine. And again, I show the renderings, what it looked like 2 weeks ago and what it looks like now is quite significant. And it completely reduces the height and massing from that street level. This to me shows Prime spending significant amount of resources in responding to public comments to try to make this work. So we do understand this is a negotiation and a compromise. We just want to make sure that negotiation and compromise is a two-way street. That's all.
Absolutely, I agree, Charlie. And I want to tell you, by the way, that when I first saw these two renderings as PDFs, I did the same exact animation back and forth.
Yeah.
And it is significant. Okay. It's a significant change with that mezzanine back part. I mean, I can see it on here a little bit, but so that's one. I just want to make sure that everybody's clear about the heights of the buildings, of the existing buildings, and the height of this building, including the mezzanine. And actually showing that mezzanine on there might be better, because it would show, you could say, look, line of sight, you're not even going to see it until you're 25 feet in the air or something, or whatever. It might actually help your case to show that mezzanine and that it's so far back. And I understand that going to the flat roof made a difference, and moving it back made a difference. It definitely did.
I will say that we did on the renderings, we did show the mezzanine level. So they are on those comparisons. As I said, Ron, one thing that might help was an understanding of how you got the numbers where you feel as though the discrepancy is, so we can make
the owner of the building.
Okay, and it was a conversation, or were there?
It was an email.
Data. Okay.
But anyway, it's no big secret. Somebody just said, "But my building's not that tall." That's all.
I just want to.
And again, it's not accusatory. This isn't accusatory. This is to say, let's get, just like we had issues at one point with PCC and whether or not their rendering was accurate or their thing was accurate. And I just want everything to be as accurate as we can. And I'm not saying I'm not in any way being accusatory. I'm really not. I'm just saying this is an evolving thing. We're getting there. This helped me tremendously. I don't know about the other board members. It helped me tremendously.
Ron,
I would like to, relative to this issue to start with, open it up to the rest of the board and see what questions they might have about any of these drawings.
I have a question.
You guys,
Hello? You okay, Ron?
Who,
Can I go?
hello?
This is Kathy. Can I go ahead?
Who's speaking?
Kathy?
Okay.
One of the things we talked about last time was quite a bit about the first floor apartments, the balconies that were on the first floor. And, you know, you did provide elevations, I think, on all views of individuals, you know, humans in relation to those balconies. Is that kind of where you're at as far as at this moment, what balconies will remain and whether some have been removed? I'm just not clear if in the most recent renderings, if balconies have been removed. And, you know, I didn't mention this last time, but my thought on it was, I think it would be easier to approve that application if you didn't have people with their heads walking by a balcony, which to me, I'm looking at, for instance, A5.3, which shows a person with their head kind of aligned with that balcony on the way down the hill elevation.
So, okay, I understand the question. Matt, if we could go to the original rendering, please, the top one. So if you look here, you have the two commercial spaces along Bridge Street, and then you have that first balcony there, which was the concern of the board because we showed that cross section, and that 6-foot individual did have his or her head, you know, in that line of sight. So Prime went back to the drawing board, altered things a bit. And if we go to the new rendering, you can see that that balcony has been eliminated. Additionally, balconies have been shifted. So they are doubled up here to help with the breakup and massing of the building. And then if we move to the north elevation and we look at our 6-foot individual, you can see there the additional commercial space window that now wraps along Bridge Street a little longer. And you see the head of that individual as he's walking downwards right there. However, it is for a much, much, much shorter distance than there was prior. And Dean, if you want to discuss a little bit about how these changes came about in your discussions with Steve, that might help the board as well.
Well, we were just trying to move the balconies back far enough so the situation wouldn't occur where somebody's head would be above the floor of the balcony. So taking that corner balcony off seemed to solve the problem. We're going to do a little bit of rearranging the inside with respect to common space and units to make that all work.
And is the south elevation, is that same change been made? I don't know if originally those, you know, those two views or two elevations were identical. But what changes have been made there? It's a little hard for me to tell what's commercial and what, I mean, I think I can understand what's commercial there on the south elevation and what isn't, but.
That concern, I don't believe was expressed on the south elevation. However, the board did want to see that 6-foot individual placed on all elevations. So here you can see on this elevation that that individual is nowhere near the balconies of the apartment complexes. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, but the commercial areas kind of span where the cursor is right now?
Approximately.
Yeah, right in that area. So as that person walks down, their head will not be near the balconies. Plus on this elevation, it's
further
important.
back on the south side to begin with than they were on the north side. So that didn't come up on the south side.
And it's important to remember on this elevation that, and it's not shown on the elevation, but there is landscaping there, and you're on that pedestrian park pathway. So while we did realize the concern on Bridge Street being the sidewalk, this will be a landscape pathway, I believe. So that mitigates that effect even more.
Is that pathway further from the building than say the sidewalk on the Bridge Street side?
It's a meandering path that kind of goes don't know if you have a copy of the site plan.
There, yeah, the last one. You can kind of see the pathway and then the green space.
It's
Got it, thank you. I wonder if you can speak to the sidewalk width issue that came up last time and just kind of clarify what changes were made and if those changes are.
Sure.
I mean, I think they were characterized as something like allowed for, I don't know that I'm quoting it, right, but allowed for a certain greater width. But I don't know if that means that that's just
Sure.
Hypothetical, or if that's something that has actually changed in the plan.
No, you know, the odd thing about this property, and you see this in urban areas, is where is the property line versus where is the curb for Bridge Street. So while an ADA compliant sidewalk was designed, we heard the concern. We went back to the drawing board to see what we could do. So now that sidewalk, if you see where it's down by the garage entrance, that sidewalk is now going to be 8 feet from building to curb. And then as you go up towards Durkee Street, it's, I don't know if it's tapering or the opposite of tapering, but it goes to 12 feet as you go up towards Durkee Street. And that was accommodated by a realization that Bridge Street, is able to be narrowed. So that is it. We're now able to accommodate the parking spaces that everyone is counting on, as well as now an 8-foot sidewalk in this area. That was the concern at the last meeting.
So the parking spaces haven't been shrunk or reduced?
Correct. If that's incorrect, Dean or Turner, please yell.
No, that's right. I mean, in the original site plan that was submitted, there were 6 along Bridge. There are currently 5 shown, but they are the same size standard parallel parking spaces.
So Charlie, can you speak to how wide the sidewalk is going to be, though there's a greater distance now from the building to the curb? What does that make the width of the sidewalks?
The sidewalk is going to be 8 feet at its narrowest point, going up to 12 feet.
The actual sidewalk?
Yep. And some of the renderings, some of the comments were that there's trees in the middle of the sidewalk. Those are just for purposes of rendering. So the site plan, you'll see where the street trees are located, and that being not within the walking area or the area that's counted for that 8 feet. So again, going back to this concept of compromise, this was, again, a great revision that was made to address a concern by the public and the board, I think with a terrific result.
Charlie,
Go ahead, Ellen.
on the Durkee Street end, can you go up to that sidewalk there? What width is that?
Sure. So where you have the angled parking spaces, we show a 5-foot concrete sidewalk there, but then, there's some space to where that line is to the curb. So you're actually looking more like a 6-foot sidewalk there. And then where the parking is not, you're substantially more. Also, you have that additional green space there that is being provided as a buffer from the building to the pedestrians, which, while, if we got rid of that green space, sure, the sidewalk might be larger, but that green space is, something you'd want to see as you're walking. Now, if you go to the south, you'll see we do have a 4-foot minimum sidewalk along where the electrical vehicle stations are. Now, the reason why that works in that location is there's no storefront there. And in fact, that was a design so that we could accommodate those electrical vehicles. but if that's 9 feet a pop, you're not looking at much of a length there for that 4-foot wide sidewalk, which again is completely ADA compliant. But again,
sidewalk. Sorry, Charlie. The sidewalk shown there is like 6.5 to 7 feet, and we're basically denoting, it has to be a minimum of 4 foot.
Oh, okay. There you go. Thank you.
But there's more room.
Yeah.
So one of the public comments was about the sidewalks and about ADA compliance. We submitted a letter, and actually we were briefed this time that showed that originally we were completely ADA compliant. We heard the complaints. We changed the sidewalks. In this notion of needing larger sidewalks and street cafe permitting under, I think, section 295 of the code, it's not applicable here because there is no street cafes proposed. So there's no outdoor dining areas. It's all street, it's all just commercial frontage. There's no tables or seasonal events are going to be held there.
Is there a way, I guess I'm going to tell you that I'm going to go back a step aside from the sidewalks, Charlie, and talk about, and I've said it with every meeting, I guess. And I fully understand the PUD process and the allowance, the ability to vary based on the fact that those variations, would they have required a variance, would have been granted the variance. So, but I guess my question is, you've done a better job on the height. Is there a way to move this building back? And I understand what I'm asking. I'm not asking this lightly. So that you're 15 feet from the property line, and that you get on Durkee Street, you've got 3 areas that this affects: Durkee Street, Bridge Street, and the waterfront, we'll call it, the river walk, which brings up another question about the issue now, of course, with the Saranac River Trail. But aside from that, you're 4 feet from the Saranac River Trail, you're 3.5 from that property line, and frankly, from the trail. You're 3.5 feet from the property line on Bridge Street, and you're whatever up here from the property line that gets you down to this very tight feeling. And I'm wondering if we start to talk about the good job you've done with the mezzanine and bringing it back further and flattening the roof, which I do think is a big improvement. There's a question if we could, and I know what I'm asking, I'm not asking this lightly. If we could, because I've asked it every month, get this 15 feet back or closer to it instead of 3 feet. It's a high rise. I'm going to digress for just 1 minute here and talk about these SUPs and what's allowed and what's not allowed. The fact of the matter is that you're allowed up to a 12-story building, right, Charlie?
That's correct.
So, right. So a 5-story building is allowed. It's an allowed use. The question about, and I want to talk about the first floor apartments, is the same thing. This is not, I've gotten a lot of correspondence, and I'm sure you've seen it, about you can't let them have first floor apartments. Every landlord downtown is going to want them. But the fact of the matter is that this planned unit development in this district is allowed to have first floor apartments. I was under the impression they wouldn't be on the street. We're trying to work that out with the balconies, and frankly, you're right that they're up fairly high for most of it. Okay. But I guess my question is, I don't know what it does as far as number of apartments. I don't know what I haven't analyzed that or looked at that because I have a very preliminary floor plan. But my question really is, and it would just, I'm talking about when we talk about compromise, when we talk about what feels good and makes people feel like cooperation, and this isn't blackmailing or anything, but the question is, can this building be made smaller? Can it be 15 feet back from the property line? I understand what that means. It probably means taking some apartments off the end, or doing a different way of mezzanines further back, or floors further back, or something. I'm just asking that because I think that we're trying to be, all of us, thorough here. And it's part of what this feeling of walkability around it. And now the Saranac River Trail is probably going to die unless, Prime, are you willing to spend the extra $700,000, Dean, to pay for the shortfall at the Saranac River Trail? You know, I'm concerned about making this a beautiful place that Prime and the city eventually, and even people that aren't so wild about it right now, can like. So there's the question: you lowered the building?
So
you lowered the building.
So okay, so if we want to go back to sharing that site plan, and Ron and the board, I think this idea of compromise was a great context to start the meeting, because we have several things that we have to contemplate when we're designing this building, or when the design team is. You know, I luckily just look at it when it's done. We had to think about parking, building height, engineering issues, and also financials, right? So the 115 units, that is now the pinch point. The project does not go forward. Finances do not work. If we do, and now let's talk about the setback, can we move the building? The way it's designed the way it is, and we've addressed this in the secret record, we've addressed this in our public comments, is because this is an urban environment. You're not going to see, or it is quite common to see, zero setbacks in urban environments, where there's no entryways, where there's no egresses or ingresses. If we were to move the building or make it smaller, if we made it smaller, we go up in height, right? So you give a little here, you take a little there. We've been working immensely hard and trying to control the height of this building because that was a major concern. And as you alluded to, we made significant strides. The last thing we want to do now is create a 15-foot setback that we feel as though does not fit within an urban environment to just go higher. Now let's just move the building to the south. I'll leave the engineering issues to Turner, but if we move that building to the south, we're now losing parking spaces in our underground lot, as well as the 50 publicly available spaces. So we want to make sure we're not losing any parking spaces. So by granting this setback that is before the planning board for this zoning deviation, what we're doing is exactly what you suggested in a compromise. What are the concerns? The concerns were parking and the concerns were building height. And because this setback is consistent with urban environments, you know, it's the least intrusive means to making this project work. And that's why it passes the area variance test that the planning board will be considering. And that's also why we don't feel it's appropriate to move the building, because then we lose other aspects that we've worked so hard to design, lowering the building height and increasing the parking. But Turner, I'll hand it over to you for some additional engineering.
Yeah, just to jump in there. So yes, the 3.5 foot setback, Ron, you know, that is at the very northeast corner of the building and the site. And that is the absolute minimum. And from there, it does taper as you go up the street and to the corner of Durkee and Prime, where on Bridge it's almost 11 feet and quite a bit more to Durkee. And as you go down Durkee Street, the right of way tapers, and we've tried to mirror that as best we can with the building. And the tallest point for a very short distance, it is 9 feet. But, you know, like Charlie said, you know, we worked hard to try and fit that building in there as best we could. And do keep in mind that 3.5 foot setback is to the property. That is not to the curb line, right? That's not, you are not walking next to the building 3.5 feet. There's 9 sidewalk at that point. And with the new layout, the minimum walking up Bridge Street at its pinch point would be an 8-foot sidewalk area. And similarly along Durkee, you know, there's a minimum of a 6.5 to a 7-foot sidewalk that, you know, we'll work with the design teams for those, and if they can get bigger, great. You know,
Yeah,
we'd love to see that happen.
If the sidewalk's more important to you than green space, we could easily take the green space out. I don't, from a standpoint of liking landscaping, I don't think it's a great idea, but Turner, if you zoom in to the, you know, zoom into Durkee Street on the walks.
Oh, on the, yeah, where, okay, yep.
And let's just talk about how wide this is, because we're really not, you know, we have, if right now you have at least 6-foot sidewalk with green space at a minimum all the way along Durkee Street. If we were to take out the green space, then you could have at least an 8-foot walk. I don't have a scale in front of me, but at least an 8-foot.
Right.
There. If that's what is more important to everybody, I would prefer the landscaping, but maybe we could come up with something, you know, if we were to widen that, come up with some sort of a, you know, a box planter or something that we could put on the windows, you know, for the season to make it look, we're big on landscaping.
Yeah.
So there's an easy fix to that. And these are things that, you know, but then our green space calculations,
right.
You know, so
it looks,
that's about 10
it
feet.
looks to me like it's pinched. I'm sorry. It looks to me like it's pinched right where we're looking now. The 6 feet. See, when you go back up go over to the right just a little bit, that looks a little bit pinched. No, stay where you were. I'm saying from where it says 6 feet, just over a little ways, it shows the 6-foot curb, but
what is that narrowest spot right there, Turner? That narrow,
right in there. It's a little pinched, but you know,
5 feet there.
I like green space, but I'm going to tell you, I think that's going to be murder to try and maintain right on the street anyway, Dean. And if you could move that green, and this is more planning board stuff, but again, it's going to these sidewalks. You move that green space somewhere else, not eliminate it, or come up with a different way. You could add that to some of the pedestrian corridor or something, so as not to affect your green space percentage. Then you'd widen that sidewalk. Again, this is planning board jurisdiction, but it goes to how we're related to the boundary line. Right.
And Ron, just so you know, I mean, we're more than happy to work with, I think ultimately that's the planning board's jurisdiction, but you know, we're happy to work with them on that. You know, maybe there's a way to come up with just some either some planters or, you know, the tough spot's going to find another space for it. And what does that do to our green space calculations? But you know, we fully intend to have to work with the board to address.
Looking at this section of the thing, it reminds me of a question I wanted to ask, which relates to first floor apartments. This is all commercial along Durkee. There's no residential use along Durkee, correct?
That's right.
All right. What if you can't rent the commercial space? Are you okay with the fact that this would begin, the first floor residential would be, I'm thinking that it would have to be defined by distance above grade, like no residential, certainly no, but in other words, you can't really, we're going to have to somehow restrict that, right?
Yeah, we're not proposing residential there, and that's not how the PUD will be approved. So if we did do that, we'd have to come back for an amendment to the PUD. And again, we'll get it. We're going to get it rented, Ron.
Yeah, but if you understand the question, right? You understand the question.
I do. Yeah, but I'm not speaking legally, but I think if we're approved for a PUD with 10,000 square foot of retail there, we wouldn't be able to just stick residential there if that's.
One thing,
Right.
one thing I'm kind of hearing a concern, Ron, from you, and maybe the other board members have it, is what happens if we do something in the future? What happens if we add something to the height of the building? What happens if we put residences in the front? What this board approves is the plan. What the planning board approves is the site plan. When we go to get building permits, let's say for tenancy of anything or construction, that building permit and those plans that are submitted have to comply with what this board and the planning board approved. So any hypothetical of what could happen in the future, rest assured that if something happens in the future that's not consistent with your approval, that will be dealt with in the process that the zoning code affords. But what you approve is the only thing we can get a building permit for.
I understand. Yeah, I just worry, we always worry about the future because, you know, people forget that stuff, what was approved. Oh, we had apartments on the first floor, we can put them in there. You know, we've all been there, so. Anybody else on the board questions on this about the property line, the sidewalks, the elevations that we were given?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to add my own personal comment. Dean, you were talking about preference of keeping that green space along Durkee Street or getting rid of it. My vote is for keeping it. I feel like that particular stretch right there is different than the Bridge Street side. That Bridge Street side, I think, is going to see more traffic. I just, that's my prediction. But anyway, I just want to put it out there. My vote is for keeping that green space there.
We had thanks for the comment. We had a hotel that we did in Saratoga Springs, and one of the last things we did was add green space because we had these 10-foot wide walkways, and we ended up with a 3-foot section of green space, and it makes all the difference in the world as to how, you know, we have the knockout roses and perennials, and it really makes a big difference in softening things up and looking nice.
Well, I think that one of the big concerns that we have is reducing as much as possible the feeling that we are walking next to this mammoth building. And if there's that little bit of the green space there, I think it'll diminish it a little bit, distance people from the building a little bit. But I don't, as you said, that's a planning board issue. So anyway.
Thank you.
Any other board members want any comments on this? I've got some more stuff, so I have plenty. If you don't, Scott?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something Charlie said, is that they made that sidewalk down Bridge Street larger by taking more of the street and not doing anything with the building. Is that how I read that?
Yeah, so we examined the width of Bridge Street and found that Bridge Street, when they do the improvements, could be narrowed and still comply with all requirements. So we were able to expand out the sidewalk.
And just to be clear also, with the last plan, they had a minimum 4-foot wide sidewalk. Without even making that modification, there was the ability to make that sidewalk wider. Turner had just put it as minimum 4 foot because that was what code was.
And Scott, just to elaborate a little further, that adjustment to the geometry of the sidewalk on Bridge Street, that does not affect in any way the parking on the north side of Bridge Street, nor does it affect the 3 traffic lanes that currently exist on Bridge Street. Those will all remain. Those can all fit within the existing geometry.
And again, the idea is to keep that on-street parking.
And the only other comment I shouldn't say the only, but is since we've been beating the sidewalk issue, you've got the ADA access out at the street along Durkee. where people have to go out towards the street and then come back in? Is that how I'm reading that drawing?
Yeah, that's correct. We actually had it up along the building, and that was a comment from the site. The planning department has a technical third-party review that we've completed, and that was a comment of theirs to pull that farther out from the building to allow some space between cars exiting and the pedestrians.
Oh, okay.
And what about the exit on Bridge Street? You can go down to the exit out of the parking garage.
So that one's similar.
sidewalk.
They had a similar comment there, and so we pulled that farther away from the building as well. But that you see on the bottom of the page there on the east side as you head towards the bridge, that's the existing curb line there that's being held.
And I'd like to also highlight that third-party review that the planning board commissioned, that was from LaBerge Engineering Group. They reviewed the plan for these types of considerations that actually we're talking about now. And they recently just, I think last week, Turner, issued a letter that our revisions satisfied their comment letter.
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't know, because that's for planning board, right? Is that possible, Charlie, can you get that sent to us? The LaBerge original letter and the original comments, and then the letter saying how you addressed them?
Yep, well,
They've been addressed.
Sure, Ron, we can send you, yes, their original responses with them. Yep.
Great, thanks. The original comments and then how to resolve. Okay. Board, you want me to go to the next topic, or anybody more questions?
I wanted to
Okay,
ask the,
go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the 50 available parking spaces.
Yes.
Is there intended to be a fee for those? And how do you, if there is, how do you intend to, that will be?
There is going to be a fee, and someone, one of the prime representatives, feel free to step in, and that fee will be consistent with the other fees that will be charged for public parking throughout the city as a part of these revisions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So likely we would have just and we're still working these issues out. We're working on a similar project in Schenectady now, but likely there'll be just a gated access that you come in, you get a card, or you swipe your credit card, and it'll be, the first hour maybe one charge, and then thereafter a lesser charge. But we do have to charge something because to be able to maintain the lot and keep it up and whatnot.
Is all of the parking in the city downtown going to be paid then? Do you know, Matt?
No final decisions have been made by the council. The recommendations put to the council from the Parking Advisory Committee were to institute a paid parking system in the off-street lots, but to maintain the existing on-street system. The only change to the on-street system would be a recommended standardization of all of the parking time limits to 2 hours throughout the special assessment district. So paid off-street, time limited on-street. And again, of course, that's subject to approval of the common council.
And maintaining the special parking district fees?
No, the recommendation was to eliminate the special assessment district fees and have the upkeep of the system paid for by the users of the system themselves, the actual parkers. But the legal structure of the special assessment district would remain in place because it does allow for versatility in planning and development. But the funding mechanism can be shifted from existing property owners to users of the system, to people parking downtown.
There are 50 spaces out of 80 something, I think, in that lot. Maybe there's 80, I don't know how many.
86.
But 86, of which 50 are considered, that's another whole topic, by the way, the parking calculation. But anyway, of which 50 are considered public, which I'm assuming means that you're not so much looking at, can I assume that, and I don't remember how your calculation went, but can I assume that that's mostly going to be the commercial property parking and that the residential parking is going to be the parking above and below grade at the apartments in general?
Correct. That's the plan. So underground in the garage, all residential.
Right. Is there enough parking there for all what you calculate to be the residential requirement? I guess this is 86. You're saying 236. I don't necessarily agree with that, but you're saying 236. So I guess that only 36 of these, or 26, right, or whatever, are the ones that you need for your building, correct, of the 86? You're saying 226, and you've got 286, so that means you've got 200 spaces other than this over around the building. That should more than take care of the building, is my point, I guess, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm talking about the residential use. I'm not talking about the...
Ron, I think I know where you're going, and I believe you're correct. So what we did was what is currently before the planning board is a deviation from Prime's demand. We have provided evidence of municipalities that have zero parking demand in their downtown areas. We provided empirical evidence of how this parking calculation has worked in similar situations. We have confirmation that it is satisfactory from the city's building inspector that the parking demand for Prime, commercial and residential, will be 226. That being said, Prime is providing 236 parking spaces for its development. On top of that, we'll have the 50 publicly available spaces. So take 86, subtract 50. So then you're going to have 26 spaces. Is that right? Is that correct?
36.
36 spaces in that center lot for prime commercial use.
Okay. I mean, if we want to, I guess I'd like to talk about that a little bit, the calculation. And I understand we've had this discussion before, and Charlie, you're already looking like I'm beating on a dead horse, but anyway.
You already know that looks, Ron.
I know, but I really want to, it goes to this whole concept of special use permits, planned unit developments, the powers of the boards and how they wield those powers. And it goes to some precedents, although I'm not so sure that it's going to set much of a precedent because it'd only be for planned unit developments. But realistically, I have to talk about this even if you're sick of hearing it, Charlie.
Never.
I have to talk about this because if our, and there's a whole bunch of numbers out there. I saw comments again. I read, and I'm not exaggerating, for about 6 hours between last night and today, at least 6 hours, page by page, every comment from everybody, everyone. Okay. And there were all kinds of numbers floating out there about why Prime needed 400 spaces or 450, and they're not doing it. But I'm going to assume that the original calculation is right for the 317, I think it is. And I'm still bothered by, I think you have enough parking, but I don't think you have any public parking. That's, I guess, my difference. And this goes back to this whole concept of the zoning board has to approve special use permits. And once they do, the planning board is allowed to allow the applicant to vary from the code as they see fit, assuming that if it required, and I'm quoting in a sense, paraphrasing, but quote, if it required that change, that variation would have required a variance, that it would have, it's a variance that would have been approved. In other words, that it's not an extreme variance. You couldn't come in and say, we've calculated it, we only need 1 space per apartment, we're only putting 100 in. That's never a variance that would have been approved. So now the question is, would there have been a variance approved for a, and I know you're saying you're giving us another 10 space, but let's go to what you say you really need, 226. Would there have been a variance approved if you came to us? It's not required, I understand, for planning and development. Would there have been one for 90 spaces? And I would say that in my in June, 21 years on the zoning board, I don't believe we've ever given a 90 space variance. That doesn't mean that you can't use an alternate calculation. It might mean that we disagree on that alternate calculation that we both feel would or would not meet the requirements of the project, which is how it's worded. So the fact of the matter is that because those 50 spaces, and they're not being double counted right now, because you're not saying, you're saying you don't need them. But if they are required, all it means is that, let's assume that we would have given you a variance, or you could have gotten one for 286 instead of 317. You still have the spaces. It only goes to the shortfall already, because there is a shortfall in amount of spaces existing now and new spaces for 850 to 820 or whatever it is, based on you providing 50 spaces. All it does is it goes to that. And that's also, by the way, based on something that's not our jurisdiction, but that we have to look at next to the boundary of this, which is the parking, the slanted parking, the diagonal parking on Durkee Street and the one way of Durkee Street, which does go to the criteria. But that's based on Durkee Street being able to have angled parking on a whole, all that other stuff, and you're 50. And I'm not convinced, even though the planning board can approve that alternate method, I'm just being honest here, that it necessarily allows you to provide the 50 spaces you're talking about for public parking. In a sense to me, it makes sense. I find it not disagreeable, challengeable, that you're providing 286, which is pretty close to what you're required, and probably you could easily say that the commercial space, this and that, blah, blah, blah. So that's my question.
Sure. So let me start from the beginning, because there was a lot in that question. First of all, this board has a settled environmental record before it. That was what the DGEIS, the FGEIS, the Common Council's finding statement, and you will have your own finding statement. You were an involved agency in that process. In that process, there was expert testimony and evidence from Carl Walker, amongst others, that completely discussed how this overall city parking scheme is going to work. This idea of dispersing parking around the city. There were studies of utilization rates. The utilization rates were in the low 60s of the parking spaces, which shows that there is more parking than that is needed, which is a detriment to communities when you have too many vacant parking spaces. So there was no contrary evidence that was to the evidence to the contrary of that. That was the environmental record. That was studied. That was reviewed. So now we're working within the context of that environmental record to narrowly look at what is the application before this board. So the application before this board is the PUD. We completely agree that you should not look at this PUD in a vacuum. You're not just drawing a line. There's going to be a development, there's going to be parking, there's going to be sidewalks, all sorts of things. Now, to say that you don't think a variance would be granted, so the planning board looks at that variance test, I do disagree. In the environmental record, in the secret documents, it says that the city's parking requirements are incredibly outdated. They need to be revised. They need to be updated to reflect modern times, to reflect walkable communities. And I pointed to other municipalities that have updated their codes and they've gone to 0 parking requirements. So the mere fact that this parking is substantial, Ron, in your eyes, is not the only test. And I went through this at the last meeting. What is the area variance test? The fact that it's a substantial number, and there's cases out there, really say nothing. It's what is the detriment going to be, and has that detriment been proven? We're probably never going to know whether or not this board would approve a 90 parking space variance. But what I do know is we have a record before us that completely shows that one is warranted. A record that I will stamp and have stamped my name to. That when we look at that balancing test, there are no adverse impacts that will be felt by the community that outweigh the benefits to the applicant here. We're providing consistent urban area downtown parking. It's been studied in the environmental record. We've provided evidence to this board that specifically addresses Prime's parking calculation. That is the 226, 236 number. The planning board is going to evaluate that. We've given them the same evidence that we've given you. So Ron, I don't know if that answers your question, but the overall parking scheme has been designed to study the utilization rates. Let's see where we can take away parking, where we can add parking. But this board now, within that context, narrowly looks at Prime's development, and then the planning board does as well. But the evidence and the record that this board has before it, we clearly have demonstrated that an area variance, if this board were to grant one, would be granted. And if not, you know, the final arbiter, if in this hypothetical area variance before your board, would be a court. And, you know, we've hopefully submitted enough evidence to prove our case.
I think you've answered some of that. I think that we have we could talk about, again, whether, first of all, in a sense, it's not our jurisdiction. If we're asked by the planning board, we can give our comments or whatever about that, and they may not like your calculation either. And what does it affect really? What it actually doesn't affect Prime. If you want to know the truth, what it affects is the rest of the parking plan for downtown. It doesn't, if you, let's say the planning board comes back and says, we don't like your alternate calculation. They're the ones who have to say, yes, it's not you go, here's an alternate calculation, you have to use it. They're the ones that have to approve that. They may come back and say, we don't like it. Provide the 286 spaces. Well, you can do that. It doesn't affect this project as much. But what is affected, and the reason I asked this is because I got so many comments from down, and I'm telling you, I'm trying to react to everything. What you're telling me, what all the comments are telling me. I have downtown landlords, of course, nobody likes change, everybody wants it easy, who are telling me that they have tenants leaving because they're not gonna have any parking except way over on, at the Arnie Pavone lot, and they're on City Hall Place, or they're on Durkee Street, or they see clients. I'm trying to understand and make sure that this parking, which is one of the 5 criteria, right, is being handled properly, that's all.
Sure.
And so what it means is that if I don't like your alternate calculation, that somehow the city, in their rehabbing of the parking, which by the way, if I read everything correctly, has to be completed before you start construction, all that parking has enough to adequately meet the people as if Prime didn't do this. And that's our goal. This is how we work our way to that goal, right? We protect the community, we help Prime get developed, and we watch and make sure that the parking works that way. That's
Sure.
all. And
No,
I'm
I
not trying to be, I just want to make sure it's done properly.
When I think, you know, I'm trying to give this board the level of assurance that it has. This project has gone through the most extensive environmental review process that is allowed under state law, right? You've gone through an environmental impact statement. I have gone through 3 of them in 8 years of practicing land use law on much, much larger projects. So to rest assured that that environmental record was reviewed thoroughly with expert opinion. Now, I understand the public comments have come in, and parking is a sensitive subject. And we, at the 11th hour today, we received a letter from the PCC's attorney who actually hit the nail on the head. And I will probably get crucified on Facebook for this. But there is a line of cases that say generalized community concerns are not enough to outweigh empirical evidence that is before a board. The evidence that this board should be looking at and weighing and considering is that of experts, that of which is in the environmental record, that of your own staff, and that of past practices. That's the evidence that matters. If there were evidence to state the otherwise, we would accept it and respond to it. It's not in the record.
I don't think that's unreasonable to say that, Charlie.
Hey, Ron, can
We
I jump
listen
in
to the
for a minute?
public. Go ahead, Corey.
Because we're getting into a legal area where Charlie is explaining to you his opinion regarding what the proper standards are before the board, and much of what Charlie said is wholly accurate. But a distinction I want to make sure that the zoning board is cognizant of is while there is a environmental record that is closed, there is nothing that can be done right now about the environmental record that's before the zoning board. And while there is documentation in the environmental record related to, for example, parking, and while the lead agency determined that there will not be a potentially significant environmental impact associated with parking, that is not the same as the board's jurisdiction as it relates to the issuance of a special use permit. So if it were as simple as where a lead agency makes a determination under seeker that is the conclusive determination as it relates to the involved agency's jurisdiction, we wouldn't be spending so much time evaluating this. So while the lead agency did make a determination that the parking will not have a potentially significant environmental impact, there are other factors to take into account in your special use permit determination other than environmental impacts. So all of the references back to the environmental record are true, but relate only to that determination that there will not be a potentially significant environmental impact. If you want to consider parking as it relates to the special use permit criteria, and you can support those determinations from the evidence that has been presented from you for issues that are not related to environmental impacts, those are absolutely within the discretion of the zoning board to consider. So I don't want you to feel hamstrung. It's important to keep the environmental record in mind. That record is closed. And when you make your findings, you will be required to consider the environmental record to support those findings. When you make a determination on the special use permit, there are things other than environmental impacts that will be appropriate for you to take into account in your determination.
So I completely agree. And my references to the environmental record were, Ron, your concerns about the overall parking. That's not specifically tied to the SUP. The evidence that we've submitted for the special use permit has been prior practices, as well as confirmation from the building inspector and examples of other municipalities. That, in conjunction with the secret record, we believe gives you the support to accept our calculations. And as you mentioned, you know, the acceptance of those calculations is a planning board issue.
You know, Charlie, it is a planning board issue, and we can have, I suppose one of the issues is going to be when we actually get to a vote and get resolutions done. And my assumption is that we're going to have a resolution that's either going to pass or fail, a positive statement that's either going to pass or fail, and I'd like it to pass. But we are also enjoined to deal with the findings, and at some point have to, I guess, make a statement regarding those findings. That brings me to another topic. Aside from all of the physical things we've discussed now, sidewalks, parking, first floors, sight lines, relationships to other buildings, there's another question I would like to talk about. Part of our process is going to be how we deal with the GEIS and the findings, which were finalized in February, right? Closed, finished up in February. And on March 13th, give or take, I went into social distancing and we hit a pandemic. I'm not talking at all now, Dean, by the way, about whether or not you can rent apartments or commercial space. That's not the point here. But what I'm going to tell you is that I think that we have I'm not saying the project is or isn't viable. That's not my point. I'm not talking about whether you can make money. That's not my point. But what I do know is that the world is different now than it was in February, when those findings that we're going to be asked to affirm or approve or have a resolution saying they're right, which in some ways will implicate that we agree that the project is right and meets the 5 criteria. Some people have asked us to put in the resolution as an example. That is a GEIS and findings that might be considered slightly obsolete. And the reason I say that is because there are issues that are brought up in there that were pre-pandemic. And that's not to say whether or not you can rent commercial space, or it's going to be a little harder. You're going to have to do a little less per square foot, or, you know, what tenants you're going to get. We're talking about, at a minimum, I think, going back to the lead agency and asking them to just review that in light of what's happened in Paws, New York, and everything that's happened. And I'm concerned about, I don't know how I can be part of a resolution yet where that GEIS, which I know is done, right? I'm not sure, is it officially closed now? Has it been officially recorded or whatever they do to that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure that we can say, oh yeah, that's right. And I've seen statements that have been suggested, resolutions about how we don't believe that the pandemic affected the project. There's been things talking about the pandemic, and then meanwhile I get all these people writing to me saying you can't do this, the pandemic. I get it both ways. But I guess my question is, this is not some small item. This is a pandemic that has affected the very core of our entire lives, including yours and including Prime's. But at a minimum, if we're going to be asked to approve or support this GEIS and the findings, do we need to ask the lead agency in light of the pandemic? And I know there's been criticisms about the pilots or this or that or whatever. And mostly that's an environmental thing, but we're talking about a pandemic with future health issues. We're talking about it with future monetary issues and financing issues and just even the way we interact. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good or bad idea to have 115 apartments all in one building. I'm just asking what the process would be, and Corey and I've talked about this some, but anyway, to me, it makes sense that before we as a board can have a resolution approving findings, that they should be looked at and revisited in light of the pandemic.
So we heard this question at the last meeting. Clearly, we did not address it well enough. The board's role, and certainly I defer to Corey, I defer to Mr. Shackner, and that's where you get your legal advice. But the board's role as an involved agency is to review the applications before it and make its own finding statement on those applications that are before it.
Okay.
If the information that was submitted to this board and that you've reviewed and that you've assessed is consistent with the FGEIS and the environmental record, then it behooves of you to make a finding statement explaining that it's consistent. Now, if you have fiscal evidence to the contrary, aside from what the prime principals have told you, that their finances have not changed based on the pandemic, that differs from the environmental record, then you are, within your role of the seeker regulations to seek some sort of relief from the seeker process. And I'll leave that up to Corey and I'll leave that up to Mark. But what I will tell you is Dean spoke the other night. We also have Todd here this evening that explained that, yes, while we are in the middle of a pandemic and an economic crisis, it has not affected the apartment real estate market. That is coming from two principals who live and breathe the real estate market. If there is other evidence out there that shows that the FGIS and the fiscal analysis in the FGIS is incorrect, that is when we might entertain an amendment to the FGIS process. However, we've verbally given that information to this board. If that's not satisfactory, we can look at other avenues. But certainly it's our position that Prime's fiscal condition and the market itself has not changed this project. Yes, we're seeing skyrocketing unemployment. There's other impacts all around the world that we're hearing in the news, but what we need to focus on is this project, not the global situation that we're in. So I can have Dean reiterate what he said the other evening, the other meeting about, the other week he rented out 20-something apartments in another development. It's those indicators that show real life examples that the fiscal conditions of Prime's situation have not changed. If there's other evidence that the board wants to review, please let us know.
Yeah, I'm not saying, I don't know if there is or isn't. All I know is that I haven't been able to go to the store for 2 months. And I think that this has been, that it is in everyone's best. And I'm going to be extreme here for a second. How about if it turns out that the models have changed, and although you can rent 115 apartments, they ought to be in 4 buildings because people don't want to live in big buildings. I'm not saying that's true. And I'm saying environmentally and health-wise, maybe someday they're going to recommend against having big buildings. I'm not saying they are. I'm saying at least it bears some review. It certainly, at a minimum, bears some review by us as a board before we're gonna do any resolution to
Sure.
approve it. Wouldn't you
Well,
agree?
I will say there is a secret rule of reason. And we cannot go down this dangerous road of hypothetical situations that need to be reviewed. You know, there's a line of cases out there that talk about when the study of impacts goes too far. And I think, Ron, you hit the nail on the head with that one. This board has a project in front of it. It has a design in front of it that has evolved. It's now time to accept it. If we can provide more fiscal analysis, please let us know. You know, we can't now think of a hypothetical situation where we live in a world where everyone's 6 feet apart for the rest of our lives. That's violating the secret rule of reason, and taking us down a dangerous hypothetical road.
Yeah. I'm not saying necessarily that. I just think that this is as big a worldwide event as we've seen. And the findings came out in February and the pandemic started in March. And so the findings were done pre-pandemic. I'm going to just look at it. I'm going to go through, I mean, I had some issues with little odd things here and there with it before, and I still don't understand. I want to be careful because if we approve the findings, which we have to do, I guess, right? We're sort of bound to approve them or do our own findings. It in a sense is tantamount to saying that we agree with everything in the findings, and the findings sort of indicate that this special use permit should be granted. So therefore we're saying we're going to grant the special use permit by approving the findings. And that's a concern.
What you have to realize is there was a process. The GEIS, this board was labeled an involved agency. An involved agency because you were involved in the GEIS process and issued comments on that GEIS process. That's why there's those line of cases that we submitted in our secret narrative that say when you do issue your finding statement, when it is assessed, if it is ever assessed to be arbitrary and capricious, it will be assessed on the evidence that's within the environmental record because you were a part of that process. That being said, if there is clarification and additional information aside from what we've submitted, please let us know.
I will. And it's on two fronts, right? We have two issues. We have where we're asking these questions about green space and parking lots and sidewalks and heights and all that, so that we can understand if you meet the 5 criteria for the special use permits for both the boundary and what happens within that boundary, A, and B, the first floor residential, which is the easier, frankly, of the two probably. And then we also have to do our findings. So we'll work on that. I want to think about it. We as a board need to keep moving on this. I think you've given us quickly every time we've asked what we've asked for. So there's no, what I can tell you is that I don't at any point feel like when we've asked for something, we haven't gotten it. Okay, so let's start with that, which is the way it's supposed to be. So I just think our next thing is to understand what we're going to do about resolutions that can then be voted on, either approved or disapproved.
Might I
that's really,
the May 4th meeting was supposed to be a deliberative process by the board. It sounds like another deliberative process to discuss and to confer with Corey the finding statement, the resolution, and legal liabilities on both arenas.
Right.
As you can
right.
tell from the public comment, the opposition here is not shy about threatening this board with litigation. So it would behoove you to consult with Corey and to start formulating those resolutions and those finding statements.
Right. And oddly enough, I do a lot of construction. I'm in the midst of all kinds of that kind of stuff, and people talk about litigation and what courts stuff gets settled in arbitration, all this other stuff. But the fact of the matter is that if somebody sues the zoning board, okay. I mean, I hate to be so cavalier, and I'm not, but the fact of the matter is we do everything we can to the best of our ability. And all this time, I think we've had one Article 78 that I've been on the board. maybe 2, I don't remember. But we're very careful about it. We don't face it, and if they do, they can garnish my entire zoning board salary for the rest of my life. But no, and we want it to, we don't like, there's no point, we don't like stuff going to court. We don't like all that stuff. But we will do our best. We're trying to do this, and you're correct. We need to talk to Corey and understand our resolutions. I think that the next step may be that I'm going to ask board members if they have any other things that they've thought of. We're still leaving the record open because we actually have new information we got tonight, right? These plans that were presented and posted. We're not opening a public hearing. I'm not doing that, but I'm going to leave the record open. I don't mind getting public comments. Listen, I've read, like I said, every one. There's a lot of it that's similar. I got a few things here and there that were not similar. And I think that we'll do what we can to get ready to get you to a vote. If we need more information or we see something that we think is a good suggestion towards the compromise that seems well thought out, we can start to talk to you about that. And then I would say that what we want to do is try and move towards getting this resolved, hopefully at our June 15th meeting.
Yeah, from our standpoint, the record is always open, right? People are always going to send in letters, but it's quite clear that the hearing and the public comment session is closed. I do understand you, though. I mean, today, for example, we got a letter from the PCC's attorney violating your May 15th deadline. One thing I just want to leave the board with is you're getting a lot of information from these letters that shows a lack of attention to the actual application. For example, we got a letter this afternoon at 3 o'clock from the PCC attorney referencing that we were asking for area variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're not asking for area variances. These are just clearly last minute attempts to continue to delay Prime. And there has to be a line drawn in the sand because that sort of input is not helpful and it's not productive.
I don't disagree.
I hope the board appreciates that, and I do thank everyone.
Right.
Ron, one thing, Ron, just to point out too, when we were talking about the sidewalk on Durkee Street, just so everybody understands, and I assume you do, but that the building is actually cantilevered on the second floor. So the first floor is actually recessed. So the feeling of width on Durkee is quite deeper. And if you look on the plan where you see the unshaded area, I meant to mention that when we were talking about it before, but in case everybody doesn't understand that, the perception is it is quite a bit further back.
Dean, I did and I didn't understand. I understood it and I sort of forgot it. I remember looking at that though before going, oh, huh. So,
that was something we addressed early on with some of the comments of a solution to pull it back.
Right. Charlie, I will tell you that although I totally value, and I don't even want to say cherish, but public input, and we get a lot of public input. This is the most I've ever gotten, frankly, but we get a lot of it often. We, as a board, value it extremely, but it is the application before us that we consider. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there is a lot of information out there. There is we hope we can clarify it, and we have clarified it to the maximum extent we can.
Right. Can I, as a quick thing, ask that, I don't know if we resolve what we're going to do about these drawings and some of the building heights. Do you have a suggestion about that?
So
or do you want us just to make the assumptions from this?
It sounded like the only concern was with the section views and drawing a line to identify the mezzanine level. I think that's easy enough. One thing we will have to do is go back with our architect, Steve, and see how the building heights can be refined. You know, I will say we just can't go measure buildings. We don't want to, it's a very tricky and an emotional process like this. You know, you're building, you can't trespass on someone's property to measure their building. We have to look at how we can more accurately depict that building. And that's why I was asking you what conversations you had with the building owners. So whether,
Right.
I didn't know if you had a, you know,
No,
other than that.
it was just, I was told the building was different, and I went down, I'm pretty familiar with that block. Not that I've never owned anything there, or anything, but I'm pretty familiar with it, and I was pretty surprised. At first, I thought they mislabeled Ashley Furniture as all floors. That's what I thought.
Well,
Honestly.
one thing, you know, that's just
But
off the top of
anyway,
my head,
I
and I don't know if
it
this
is
can be
30
done, but depending on how old those buildings are, we might be able to pull their building permits and see what
Now,
they're.
you're not going to find that. They're all old. But what I tell you is that if you go to that parking lot and you take a picture of a building and you know that the door is 7 feet tall, you can figure out how tall the building is.
We will do with our best to refine those calculations, and
That'd be great.
we'll
That'd be great.
correspond in the meantime to make sure everyone's
Yeah,
satisfied.
you've got some time. I don't need them tomorrow or the next day, okay? No, but let's get them right so that we know what we're talking about. I think it'd be very helpful. Be good for Prime, and it'd be certainly helpful to understand the line of sight to the mezzanines. It might allay some fears for people.
And then the other thing, you know, I know there's some mixed feelings about the landscaping along Durkee Street. You know, my personal preference would be to keep landscaping, especially Dean just pointed out that cantilevered over. But I just wouldn't want that issue to come up at the next meeting and then delay us for another meeting. So
I think that's really a planning board issue.
Okay. So we will do the revised section views. Once
Right.
again, it seems as though we've narrowed down our list.
Right.
Which is good because I'm running out of legal pads to take all these notes.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to also just ask the board members quickly if any of them have any other questions or comments, things they want to address. Remember last week, Megan wanted the 6-foot people. So anyway, I'm going to ask board members if you have any questions, or Kathy or anybody, Scott, if you have any concerns, any information you want for them for before next time. No? Okay. So I guess on that note,
Mr. Chairman, I have one further
Go ahead,
request.
Matt.
If it's your intention to continue to hold the record open, I would request some clarity from the board on exactly how long we're leaving it open and for what type of comments, because it would be helpful to have clarity.
I'm going to tell you that to talk about not being slaughtered on Facebook, Charlie and Matt. Quite honestly, I don't see where it's any problem getting comments from anybody. Last time we did it till 3 o'clock the Friday before the meeting. I think that we would ask as a courtesy that that's done. But that, frankly, this time we were getting them, and you were getting them, and I was getting answers, by the way, from Turner at 6 o'clock. So everybody was sending stuff late. You're the applicant, you're different than public comments. I understand that. But I would say yes, I'd like to keep the record open, allow public comments, written comments, the same system as long as we can, not to burden Shalice too much. But I think people have said a lot of stuff, and I'm hoping the public will only make comments about this new information as opposed to what they've been, we understand a lot of the concerns. I'd like them to deal with mostly, we said it last time, but I'll say it again, the new information. And I'd like to leave it open until the next meeting. I don't see, there's no harm in it, really. Matter of fact, it could be helpful to Prime to understand some of those new concerns and be able to react to them. We've got some time to do it. Won't be so rushed. Okay? Anybody else? Any questions? I'm getting ready to adjourn if I don't hear
I just want to be clear, Ron, so the only deliverable that we have is to just try to get a little bit more accurate measurements of
That's right.
buildings and also a little bit better, maybe a shot or another elevation from the street looking up to see what portion.
It's on that, right, on the same elevation. Once the mezzanine is shown on there, Dean, the top of the mezzanine, then you can say, look, you're not even gonna see it till you're 20 feet in the air or whatever. That's why I think that's helpful to you.
Yeah.
Because Charlie, it started with it that we couldn't see it from the street, which I fully agree. You can barely see it in the new rendering. Okay, and that's from higher up.
Right.
So,
but I'm not sure how will, without getting in building, I'm just trying to figure out how we can do that. So how we can say to what spot that you know.
it's a line, really. It's a line from the other building over. In other words, if you come up the face of the building on the other side of Jersey Street or Bridge Street, you'll know you're going to come up that building till eventually that line pivoting off the front corner of the building will see the mezzanine.
So you want
That's all.
the 6-foot person to now be elevated into the building across the street?
No, just a line of sight. Just say you can't even see the building unless your head was 22 feet off the ground or whatever it is. Just a line, you don't need the 6-foot person up there.
Okay.
Okay? And that's the deliverable right now. Does anybody have anything else? Because if not, I'm going to adjourn or ask for a motion to adjourn.
Ron, I know this is not a public hearing, but in a normal meeting, you would be able to see this for yourself. There are hands up. It's up to the board on how you guys want to address that, but I just want to make sure you're aware.
Okay. Well, actually, I don't know if I can adjourn the meeting. I guess I can adjourn this application hearing for tonight, right, Charlie? Right, Corey? We may have other business besides the application. I'm not adjourning the meeting. I'm only saying that we're done with the prime application and information session for this evening, and that we'll see you next month and we'll correspond in between. Does that make sense, Charlie, to you?
Yep.
Okay, so we're set with that. Evan, we're all set with the applicants, and then I'm gonna just go to the board and see if we have any other business before we adjourn as a meeting. All right, thank you very much, Prime. Okay, does anybody have any other business? Okay, where are the takeout margaritas? That's what
We have minutes from
Yeah.
February if you wanted to touch those.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, did everyone read them?
No, I read them.
I read them.
I read them when I got them.
Who
Who
wa-
they are now?
Okay, who is gonna vote on the acceptance of the January meeting minutes? And Shalice, are you doing minutes now then?
Yes, I'll be taking over the minutes. I don't have the ones from 2 weeks ago for you, but
No,
you'll
that's
have
it.
them for the next meeting.
You'll be doing the minutes, right? Okay. So we have what, Scott, January, did you say?
February?
February.
February.
Don't we have a couple in April too? We have a couple from April.
Okay.
How'd those come to us? I don't remember seeing those.
What's that?
I've got April 6th and April 20th.
Yeah, I have those too.
Don't know when they came, but probably before the last meeting, I would guess.
Ain't way too many packets here.
Yeah. Can't believe I put my hands on any of them.
Let's start with February 10th. I'd like to make a motion to approve the February 10th meeting minutes as written.
I'll second that.
All in favor by raising their hand? Aye. Okay. I'm gonna just quickly do a roll call anyway. Kelly,
Yes, approve.
Ron, yes. Kathleen,
Aye.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
you didn't vote, did you, Ellie?
I did.
Yeah, okay, you two then. Okay. All right. Is that it for minutes?
Are we not doing April? You didn't read them, Scott, right? So we should probably not.
No, I just won't vote. That's fine.
Okay. I did read them. I thought they were fine. Did you see anything, Kathleen?
Nope, I'd move to approve April 6th. Is that what you're looking at? April 6th?
Yep, I have both. I'll second that approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Kelly?
I vote that we approve the minutes for the April 20th.
Right.
Oh, are we taking a roll call for?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yes. Ron, yes. Kathleen?
Yep.
Kelly?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Scott? Okay.
No vote.
No vote.
Didn't read them.
Abstain?
Abstain, yeah.
Okay. They're approved anyway. Do we have any other business?
Are we going to approve the
actually-
April 20 minutes?
April 20th minutes.
What is it?
April 20th minutes.
That's what we just approved, wasn't it?
No, that
We
was
did
April 6th.
6th.
Oh, that was April 6th. Okay.
April 20th was
I'll take a
Stewart
motion.
Shops and that was our super long meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did they get a motion or no?
I make a motion that we approve the April 20th, 2020 meeting minutes as written.
Who wants to second it?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Scott, you're just not voting, are you? Okay.
I haven't read them.
Roll call. Kelly?
Yep, yes.
Ron, yes. Kathy?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Okay, all set.
Motion adjourned.
I'd like to, we
Second.
don't have to decide it. Oh, okay.
Cut Ron right off.
I don't like it.
Okay,
Go.
I don't care. I'd
Starving.
like to, we don't have to set it up now, but I would like to try and have a Zoom or whatever meeting kind we do with Corey to discuss the resolutions fairly soon and talk about that. We can do that as a board because it's legal advice. And I want to talk about what we're allowed to do and not do. What happens when we want to either approve or disapprove a motion and how our motions are going to work. And they're going to be a motion to adopt a resolution probably and all that stuff. So we'll do some emails back and forth just to decide when it's convenient for Corey. We'll start with his schedule, work with that to get something
And
later
Ron,
this week.
just on that point, so that it's crystal clear. You can meet with me outside of an open meeting for the purpose of me giving you legal advice on a specific.
Right.
So we can definitely meet to discuss and for me to provide you with legal advice. Your deliberative process, the discussion surrounding the applications, that all has to occur in a public setting at a duly noticed public meeting. But yes, we can meet in between meetings for the purpose of me providing legal advice to the board. That falls outside of the open meetings law. It's protected by the attorney-client privilege. And for the limited purpose of me providing legal advice to the board, we can meet for that purpose. But just wanted it to be clear on the record that any of your deliberations and discussions of the project outside of me providing legal advice will occur at a duly noticed open meeting.
Right. And we can, as an example, probably, correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, have say Kathy and I represent the board with Corey to discuss resolutions and have them email to everybody separately to discuss the help as we get closer to writing these. Correct, Corey?
Well,
two of us.
So long as a majority of the board is not meeting to discuss official city business, that can
Okay.
occur. As soon as a majority of the board needs to discuss official city business, that has to be done at a duly noticed open meeting. But yes, I can communicate with you, so, you know, and others outside the context of a meeting, not, you know, but again, anytime a majority of the board needs to discuss official city business, that'll be done at an open meeting, as will any deliberations
Right.
regarding the application.
I'm doing it on purpose, Scott. Okay, and we will do that. And we'll be careful about that. Part of it is that I'd like to though still meet as board so you can explain our legal rights and responsibilities relative to the resolution process. Okay, so with that said, we'll get that set up at some point here. We'll see when people are available. Does anybody have any other business? If not, I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Kelly,
I'm good.
polling the board. Ron, yes. Kathleen,
Yes.
Ellie,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
We're all set. We are adjourned. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Corey.
Joe, can I ask you a quick question before we head out?
Yeah.
Yep.
Joe, yeah.
Yes.